Sterile millionaire sees a boy crying at his ex-wife's grave. The boy's answer makes him cry. My mom wrote this for you. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. It always makes my day to read your comments. The wind whistled through the cemetery's iron gates as William Taylor pulled his cashmere coat tighter around his shoulders. At 45, the pharmaceutical tycoon cut an imposing figure, tall with steel-gray eyes that matched the tombstones surrounding him. The bouquet in his hand felt like an obligation, much like this annual visit to his ex-wife's grave. 5 years had passed since Melissa's death, but William felt nothing beyond mild irritation at having to reschedule a board meeting for this ritual. The path ahead was empty, except for a small figure hunched over a nearby grave. As William approached Melissa's resting place, he noticed it was a boy in a wheelchair, perhaps 8 or 9, his small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. William placed his flowers methodically against the headstone, mentally checking this task off his list. When he turned to leave, the boy had wheeled himself closer, negotiating the gravel path with obvious difficulty. Their eyes met, the boy's red-rimmed and puffy, William's cold and impatient. Are you Mr. William Taylor? The child's voice was surprisingly steady despite his tear-stained face. William nodded curtly, already reaching for his phone to check emails. I'm Ethan, the boy said, fumbling with something in his lap. Before my mom died last week, she made me promise to give you this. He extended a yellowed envelope with trembling fingers. Something in the boy's determined gaze made William take the letter. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably Melissa's, elegant cursive that once filled love notes in their early days together. William tore it open, his practiced composure cracking as he read, William, this is our son Ethan. The doctors were wrong. You weren't sterile. I discovered I was pregnant after our divorce, but your clear hatred of children and what you called weakness made me keep him from you. Now that I'm gone, he has no one. Despite everything, I believe there's still good in you. He's yours, William. Please don't punish him for my decisions. The paper trembled in William's hand as his eyes darted between the letter and the boy. The resemblance was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Ethan had his jawline, his eyes, even the way his eyebrows furrowed in concentration. Where are you staying now? William managed, his voice unnaturally tight. Nowhere, sir. The lady from services said they're finding me a special home tomorrow because of my... Ethan gestured at his wheelchair, sorry, in my condition. William stood frozen, staring at this child, his child, frail in a wheelchair, with a medical condition he knew nothing about, looking up at him with a mixture of hope and resignation. For the first time in decades, William Taylor had absolutely no idea what to do next. William's sleek Bentley pulled up to his mansion's circular driveway, the wheelchair awkwardly folded in the trunk. The drive from the cemetery had been silent, with William making urgent calls to his lawyer and Ethan staring out the window, clutching a small backpack containing his entire life. This is temporary, William stated flatly as his housekeeper. Mrs. Winters helped maneuver Ethan inside. The mansion echoed with emptiness, marble floors, minimalist furniture, abstract art that cost millions but conveyed nothing of warmth. The East guest suite, William instructed Mrs. Winters, refusing to meet Ethan's eyes. And arrange for a nurse, someone with experience in these matters. That night, alone in his study, William poured himself a scotch and studied the letter. Again, doubt coursing through him. Melissa had to be lying. The doctors had been definitive. He was sterile, had been since birth. A convenient excuse when she wanted children and he didn't. His mind drifted to their last fight. There are thousands of children who need homes, William, Melissa had pleaded. I didn't build an empire to waste it on someone else's discarded genetics, he'd replied coldly. The memory made him wince now. William opened his laptop, typing, neurodegenerative conditions in children, with trembling fingers. As medical terms and prognoses filled his screen, something inside him clenched. He slammed the laptop shut and ordered his assistant to arrange a DNA test immediately. Later, passing the guest room, William heard soft crying. He paused, hand raised to knock, then lowered it. Comfort wasn't in his repertoire. Instead, he called the lab, demanding the DNA results be expedited. "Sir," his assistant reminded him, "it's 2 a.m. "I don't care if it's Judgment Day," William snapped. "I want those results tomorrow." The next morning, William found Ethan silently observing the garden from his wheelchair on the terrace. Morning light caught the boy's profile, and the resemblance struck William again, undeniable despite his desperate wish to deny it. "The doctors say I'll need the wheelchair all the time soon," Ethan said without turning. "It's getting harder to stand each month." The clinical detachment in the child's voice, so like his own when discussing uncomfortable truths, unsettled William deeply. "I've arranged for a specialist to examine you," William said stiffly. "And a nurse arrives today." Ethan finally turned. To him, eyes disconcertingly direct. "You don't have to keep me, you know. Mom said you might not want to." Something in those words, the resignation, the expectation of rejection, pierced William's carefully constructed armor. For a brief moment, he saw himself at 9, standing before his own father, being told he wasn't good enough, strong enough, worthy enough. "We'll wait for the test," William replied, his voice softer than he intended. "Until then, this is where you stay." As he walked away, William couldn't explain the strange relief he felt when Ethan called after him. "I like your garden. Mom never had space for flowers." The DNA results arrived by courier 2 days later. William locked himself in his study to open the envelope, hands uncharacteristically unsteady. The clinical language blurred before his eyes, but one phrase stood out with crystal clarity. 98% probability of paternity. William sank into his leather chair, the paper slipping from his fingers. Science had betrayed him twice, first with the incorrect sterility diagnosis and now with confirmation that Ethan was indisputably his son. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Rebecca, the pediatric nurse he'd hired, stood in the doorway, her expression tense. "Mr. Taylor, there's a Ms. Daniels here from Social Services. She insists on speaking with you regarding Ethan." In the living room, a stern woman with practical shoes and a folder thick with documents waited. "Mr. Taylor, I'm concerned about the sudden placement of a special needs child in your home without proper evaluation or preparation." William's jaw tightened. "I've hired specialists and ordered equipment." "It's not about money," Ms. Daniels countered. "Ethan has specific physical and emotional needs. His condition is progressive. Are you prepared to watch your son lose his abilities one by one? To help him process that grief?" The word son hit William like a physical blow. "We have an excellent specialized foster facility that—" "No." William's voice cut through the room like steel. "Ethan stays here." Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Taylor, forgive my bluntness, but your reputation precedes you. You've built an empire by prioritizing profits over people. Why should I believe you can suddenly prioritize a child's needs?" Something ignited in William's chest. Anger, pride, or perhaps something deeper he couldn't name. "Because he's my son." The words felt foreign on his tongue. "And I protect what's mine." After she left, William found himself drawn to his company's research archives. Hours later, horror washed over him as he discovered an abandoned research project focused on Ethan's exact condition. He'd personally killed the funding 8 months ago when profit projections fell short. Not enough affected patients to justify development costs, read his own callous notes. Bile rose in his throat as he realized his business decisions had directly impacted his son's chances. Years of ruthless cost-cutting, of treating rare diseases as unprofitable ventures. How many other children had he condemned through spreadsheet calculations? William found himself outside Ethan's room, watching the boy struggle to transfer from his wheelchair to the bed. His son's determination was evident in every labored movement, every grimace that quickly disappeared when he thought someone might see. When Ethan nearly fell, William instinctively stepped forward, then froze. What, right, did he have to help now? How could hands that had signed away research into his son's cure offer comfort? "I can do it," Ethan said firmly, not looking up. "Mom taught me how." After one more painful attempt, Ethan succeeded, settling into bed with the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to fighting battles alone. William retreated silently, returning to his study where he made a single phone call. "Restart Project Helios," he ordered his research director. "I don't care about the cost. Find me everything we know about pediatric neurodegenerative conditions. And Jenkins, this is now our top priority." Rebecca Harris adjusted her nurses' watch and arranged Ethan's medications with practiced efficiency. 3 days into her employment at the Taylor mansion, she'd already formed her opinions about its master. William Taylor might be a pharmaceutical genius with billions to his name, but as a father, he was woefully inadequate. "Has your father asked about your physical therapy schedule?" Rebecca asked Ethan, helping him stretch his increasingly uncooperative legs. "He's very busy," Ethan answered diplomatically, his eyes darting to the doorway as if William might materialize. Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. Too busy for his own son? Later that afternoon, as Rebecca wheeled Ethan through the mansion's sprawling first floor, they discovered a grand piano in a rarely used sitting room. Dust covers suggested it hadn't been played in years. "I used to have lessons," Ethan said softly, his eyes lighting up for the first time since arriving. "Before my hands started getting weaker." With determination that surprised Rebecca, Ethan maneuvered himself from the wheelchair onto the bench. His first attempts at playing were clumsy, his fingers not responding as they once had. But gradually, a simple melody emerged, halting, but recognizable. Neither noticed William standing in the shadows of the hallway, briefcase forgotten at his side. He watched Ethan struggle with fascination and discomfort. The boy's face reflected intense concentration, joy when notes came correctly, and stubborn resolve when they didn't. William recognized that expression. It was the same one he wore when tackling seemingly impossible business challenges. That genetic connection unsettled him more than any DNA test. When Ethan's fingers finally faltered completely, his frustration manifested in a single tear he quickly wiped away. As he attempted to return to his wheelchair, his weakened legs buckled. William instinctively stepped forward, then froze as Rebecca appeared, helping Ethan safely back into his chair. "You did wonderfully," she assured him. "No, I didn't," Ethan replied with brutal honesty. "But I'll try again tomorrow." Later, Rebecca confronted William in his study, her professional demeanor barely concealing her disapproval. "He needs his father, Mr. Taylor, not just your money or your hired help." William looked up coldly from his laptop. "What he needs is medical care I can provide. Sentiment won't cure progressive myofibrillar myopathy." Rebecca's eyes widened at his clinical assessment. "You researched his condition?" "I know everything about it," William replied, his voice mechanical. "Average prognosis, treatment options, success rates." He turned back to his screen. "I've restructured my entire research division to explore innovative approaches. And yet you can't restructure your schedule to have dinner with him." "Ms. Harris," William said with dangerous quietness, "I hired you to care for my son's physical needs, not to critique my parenting." Rebecca stood her ground. "Your son needs both medicine and love, Mr. Taylor. Which one are you afraid of providing?" After she left, William remained motionless, her words echoing uncomfortably. On his screen, research summaries and medical journals glowed with cold facts and statistics about Ethan's condition. William understood these. They were quantifiable, manageable. What he couldn't quantify was the hollow feeling in his chest when he'd watched Ethan struggle at the piano, or the unfamiliar urge to help when the boy had almost fallen. For a man who had built an empire on certainty and control, these new emotions were as frightening as they were foreign. The morning began with chaos at Taylor Pharmaceuticals. William stormed through the executive floor, his face a thundercloud of rage. "You're telling me we sold the myofibrillar myopathy research to Nexus?" he demanded, slamming a folder onto the conference table. His executive team shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, you approved the sale 6 months ago," his CFO reminded gently. "The project was deemed financially non-viable and Nexus offered 3 times its value." William's jaw clenched. What had seemed like brilliant business strategy months ago now felt like betrayal. Those files contained potential treatments for Ethan's condition, sold to competitors because of his own ruthless profit calculations. For 3 days, William disappeared into his home office, emerging only for coffee as he reviewed every scrap of research his company had retained. Phone calls to scientists went unanswered, while Ethan ate meals with Rebecca, glancing occasionally at the closed office door. On the 4th day, William finally emerged, hollow-eyed and unshaven. He found the house quiet and followed the sound of soft humming to the garden. Ethan sat in his wheelchair beneath an oak tree, a sketchpad balanced on his knees. His hand moved slowly across the paper, each stroke deliberate and careful. William approached quietly, expecting the boy to startle. Instead, Ethan merely glanced up, then returned to his drawing. "You're finally out of your cave," Ethan observed matter-of-factly. William blinked, surprised by the directness. "I had work to do." "Mom said you were always working. She said that's how you change the world." Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he continued drawing. She wasn't mad about it. William found himself speechless at this unexpected absolution from Melissa beyond the grave. "What are you drawing?" he asked finally. Ethan hesitated before turning the sketchpad. William's breath caught. It was him, rendered with surprising skill for a 9-year-old. The portrait captured not just his features but something deeper, the intensity in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Mom had pictures," Ethan explained. "She said I got my drawing ability from your side of the family." William recalled his mother's watercolors, hidden away after her death when his father deemed art a frivolous pursuit. "She was wrong about one thing," Ethan continued, returning to his sketch. "What's that?" "She said you were a good man who forgot how to show it." Ethan's strokes became firmer. "You don't seem like you forgot. You seem like you never knew." The brutal honesty, delivered without malice, struck deeper than any boardroom confrontation. Before William could respond, dark clouds that had been gathering suddenly opened. Large raindrops pelted them as thunder rumbled. Ethan struggled to gather his art supplies as the rain intensified. Without thinking, William scooped him up, leaving the wheelchair as he dashed toward the house. Ethan was lighter than he expected, frighteningly fragile in his arms. The boy instinctively wrapped his arms around William's neck, the first real physical contact between them. Inside, William set Ethan on a sofa, both of them dripping onto the expensive upholstery. He turned to call for Rebecca, but paused when he realized Ethan had fallen asleep almost instantly, his small body exhausted from the simple act of drawing. William stood watching his sleeping son, the portrait clutched forgotten in his hand. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, not pity, not obligation, but something more complex and uncomfortable. Later, while Ethan napped, William silently placed the drawing in his desk drawer, his fingers lingering on the image before closing it away. "We leave for Boston in 2 hours," William announced at breakfast, startling both Ethan and Rebecca. He hadn't joined them for a meal in days. "Boston?" Rebecca asked, automatically checking Ethan's medication schedule on her tablet. "Medical conference. 3 days." William's eyes darted to Ethan, then away. "I've arranged for a temporary nurse there. Ms. Harris, you'll have a paid vacation." Rebecca frowned. "Ethan's routine is delicate. A new caregiver." "I've already accepted the conference invitation," William interrupted. "The arrangement is final." After breakfast, Rebecca found William in his study. "With respect, sir, Ethan's not a piece of luggage you can check at a hotel while you attend meetings. This conference has a panel on experimental treatments for rare muscular disorders," William replied without looking up. "I need to speak with the researchers directly." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "You're researching his condition?" "I'm exploring all options." William straightened papers on his desk. "The panel includes scientists who previously worked for my company, scientists whose projects I discontinued." Understanding dawned on Rebecca's face. "You're trying to recover the research you sold?" William finally met her gaze. "Whatever it takes." Hours later, they arrived at Boston's Grand Meridian Hotel. While a bellhop took their luggage, Ethan marveled at the ornate lobby, his eyes wide. "This is fancier than the hospitals I've stayed in." William managed a tight smile. "The penthouse. Suite is accessible, I made sure." Later that evening, William adjusted his tie before the conference reception. He'd arranged for a local nurse named Julia to stay with Ethan. "Which companies will be there?" Ethan asked unexpectedly, watching. William, prepare. "Most major pharmaceutical firms. Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Mom used to read business news to me. She said you were famous for being the shark of Pharma Street." William stiffened. "That was a sensationalist nickname. She said you were the best at making money from medicine." Ethan's eyes held no judgment, just curiosity. "Is that why you're so rich?" The bluntness of the question caught William off guard. "It's complicated." "Not really," Ethan replied. "You either help people get better and make money, or you just make money." Before William could respond, the nurse arrived, saving him from answering. The conference reception buzzed with industry elites. William navigated the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries while mentally mapping which researchers he needed to corner regarding Ethan's condition. "William Taylor," a voice boomed across the room. "The shark himself." Dr. Abe Jenkins approached, a glass of champagne in hand. "Still swimming in profits while patients drown in debt?" Surrounding conversations quieted as people watched the confrontation unfold. "Dr. Jenkins," William acknowledged coldly. "Still blaming business for your research failures?" Jenkins smiled without warmth. "I recently published a paper on pharmaceutical ethics. You should read it, if you can understand words that aren't preceded by dollar signs." Whispers rippled through the crowd. William maintained his composure, though his knuckles whitened around his glass. "Some of us build sustainable businesses that advance medicine," William replied evenly. "Others chase academic accolades while actual treatments languish in underfunded labs. Sustainable?" Jenkins laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call abandoning research into rare diseases because the affected population isn't profitable enough?" William opened his mouth to deliver a cutting retort when movement at the entrance caught his eye. Julia the nurse was wheeling Ethan into the reception hall, the boy's eyes scanning the crowd until they locked with William's. "I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor," Julia explained as they approached. "He was very insistent about seeing where you were speaking. Tomorrow." William felt exposed as conversations around them died. Everyone knew about his ruthless business practices. Now they were seeing the boy in the wheelchair watching him with undisguised curiosity. "Is this your son?" Jenkins asked, genuine surprise replacing hostility. Before William could answer, Ethan extended his hand to Jenkins. "I'm Ethan Taylor. Are you one of the doctors researching muscle diseases?" The simple question, asked with such innocent directness, transformed the atmosphere. Jenkins knelt to Ethan's level, his demeanor completely changed. "I am, young man. In fact, it's my life's work." William watched, speechless, as his greatest professional critic and his son began an animated conversation about experimental treatments. For the first time, William saw himself through Ethan's eyes and found himself wanting. The return to the mansion carried a strange tension. William had cut their Boston trip short after the conference reception, canceling his speaking engagement in favor of a hasty departure. Throughout the flight home, he'd buried himself in his tablet, occasionally glancing at Ethan with an unreadable expression. 2 days had passed since their return, with William once again retreating to his study. Ethan had asked about him only once, then seemed to accept the renewed absence with practiced resignation. Rebecca found Ethan at the base of the grand staircase on the third morning, his wheelchair parked to the side. Using the ornate banister for support, he was attempting to pull himself up to the first step. "Ethan," she rushed forward. "What are you doing?" "Going upstairs," he answered, his face flushed with effort. "Like normal people." "There's an elevator." "I don't want to use the elevator." Ethan's voice cracked with frustration. "I want to use the stairs like I used to, before everything started breaking." Rebecca moved to help him, but Ethan shook his head fiercely. "I can do it myself." From his study doorway, William watched silently, caught between intervention and respect for his son's determination. The sight was painfully familiar. Himself, at 9, struggling with algebra while his father observed coldly, refusing to offer help because tailor men overcome obstacles themselves. Ethan managed to pull himself onto the first step, triumph flashing across his face before fading into concentration as he faced the next one. His arms trembled with the effort. William stepped forward just as Ethan's grip faltered. Before either adult could reach him, the boy tumbled backward, a cry of pain escaping as he hit the marble floor. Rebecca immediately knelt beside him, professional assessment overtaking panic. "Where does it hurt, Ethan?" "My wrist," he gasped, cradling his left arm. William stood frozen, useless, as Rebecca gently examined the injury. "We need an X-ray," she decided, looking up at William. "It might be broken." The hospital waiting room was painted in cheerful colors that failed to mask the institutional atmosphere. William paced while Rebecca filled out paperwork, Ethan watching them both silently from his wheelchair, his wrist in a temporary splint. "Why do they even make stairs?" Ethan finally muttered, breaking the tense silence. William stopped pacing. "What? If you build things everyone can't use, you're really saying some people don't matter?" Ethan continued, his young face serious. "That's what you do at your company, isn't it? Decide who matters?" The directness of the question stunned William. Before he could formulate a response, a doctor called Ethan's name. Hours later, Ethan slept in his hospital bed, his fractured wrist set in a blue cast. William stood at the window, city lights blurring as exhaustion and unexpected emotion overtook him. "He'll be fine," Rebecca said softly, entering with coffee. The break was clean. "This time," William replied, his voice rough. "What about next time? Or when he can't walk at all? Or when his heart muscle weakens?" Rebecca studied him carefully. "You've been researching his condition thoroughly. I know exactly what's coming." William's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "I've looked at every study, every case history. I know what he'll lose, when he'll lose it, how it will end. And knowing this, what will you do?" William turned from the window, his face haggard with an emotion Rebecca couldn't quite name. "I don't know how to be what he needs," he admitted. "Just be his father," Rebecca answered simply. "The rest will follow." The mansion buzzed with activity. Construction workers moved efficiently through the hallways, installing sleek ramps over steps, widening doorways, and mounting support rails in strategic locations. In the main foyer, an elevator technician made final adjustments to a newly installed lift. From his temporary office in the sunroom, William supervised the chaos with uncharacteristic patience. Architectural plans covered his makeshift desk, each page marked with careful annotations in his precise handwriting. "The contractor says the pool modifications will be finished next week," Rebecca reported, entering with Ethan's medication schedule. "The therapy room equipment arrives tomorrow." William nodded, studying a blueprint for accessible bathroom fixtures. "And the voice-activated system?" "Being installed Thursday." Rebecca paused, observing William with newfound respect. "You've thought of everything." "Hardly," William replied, his attention shifting to Ethan in the garden visible through the windows. The boy was attempting to navigate the newly installed stone paths in his wheelchair, his casted wrist making the task more challenging. "I should have done this weeks ago." That evening, William knocked tentatively on Ethan's door, a stack of books under his arm. The renovations had progressed to Ethan's suite, transforming it with subtle adaptations that acknowledged his condition without emphasizing limitation. "Time for bed," William announced awkwardly, hovering in the doorway. Ethan looked up in surprise from his tablet. "You don't have to. Rebecca usually helps me. I've given her the evening off." William approached, placing the books on the nightstand. "I thought perhaps I could read to you tonight." The suggestion hung in the air, both recognizing it as the overture it was. "Mom used to read to me every night," Ethan said quietly, "before she got too sick." William nodded, unsure how to respond to the mention of Melissa. He picked up the top book, a collection of science articles for young readers. This seemed appropriate. A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Mom got me mystery novels. Said I needed imagination, not just facts. I can get different books tomorrow, William offered quickly. No, this is good. Ethan settled against his pillows. I like science. William began reading mechanically, his businessman's voice flat and unmodulated. As minutes passed, however, the content drew him in, an article about space exploration written with surprising elegance. His tone softened, finding natural rhythms in the prose. When he finished the first article, William looked up to find Ethan watching him intently. You read differently than Mom, Ethan observed. She did voices. You sound like you're trying to understand every word. I suppose I am, William admitted. Science was always more comprehensible to me than fiction. Why? The simple question caught William off guard. Fiction is unpredictable. Science follows rules. Like business? Ethan asked shrewdly. Yes. William considered his next words carefully. In business, decisions are based on data, probabilities, return on investment. It's orderly. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Is that why you stopped that research? The one Dr. Jenkins mentioned for people with conditions like mine? Because the numbers didn't work? The directness of the question struck William like physical impact. He could have deflected or dismissed it as childish simplification. Instead, looking into eyes so disconcertingly like his own, he chose honesty. Yes, and I was wrong. The admission hung between them, weighty and transformative. Read another, Ethan requested after a moment, pointing to an article about deep-sea exploration. Later, as Ethan drifted to sleep, William remained seated beside the bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest. On the nightstand lay the science magazine, alongside medication bottles, a water glass, and a small framed photo of Melissa that Ethan kept close. For the first time, William truly looked at the photograph, Melissa laughing, her arm around a younger, healthier Ethan. She'd aged since their divorce, lines of hardship etched around her eyes, but her smile remained unchanged, genuine, warm, everything his had never been. I'm trying, he whispered, unsure whether he was addressing Melissa's photograph, the sleeping boy, or some part of himself long suppressed. I don't know if it's enough, but I'm trying. The cabin overlooked a pristine lake, its weathered wooden deck extending almost to the water's edge. Unlike William's mansion, this retreat was cozy rather than imposing, rustic but comfortable, with wide doorways and a newly installed ramp, the only hints of its accessibility modifications. You own this place? Ethan asked, maneuvering his wheelchair onto the deck, his cast recently removed but a brace still supporting his healing wrist. My grandfather built it, William replied, setting down their bags. Before the Taylor fortune, before pharmaceuticals, he was a doctor in a small practice. Ethan squinted at William. You don't seem like someone who goes fishing. A small smile touched William's lips. I haven't been here in 20 years. Not since before. He trailed off, memories surfacing of bringing Melissa here once, early in their marriage. Before what? Before I became the person everyone thinks I am. Rebecca had argued against the weekend getaway, citing medical concerns, but William had been adamant. His doctors agree a change of environment would be beneficial, he'd insisted, and I've arranged for emergency services if needed. What he hadn't mentioned was his bone-deep need to escape the mansion's oppressive grandeur, to find neutral ground where he and Ethan might finally connect. That evening, they sat on the deck with simple fishing rods, lines cast into the still water. William demonstrated how to bait the hook, his hands moving with unexpected familiarity. My grandfather taught me when I was younger than you, he explained. Said a man should know how to feed himself independent of fortune. Did your dad fish too? Ethan asked, concentrating on holding his rod steady with weakened hands. William's expression darkened. My father believed in boardrooms, not bait shops. He considered this place an embarrassment. Is that why you stopped coming? The directness of the question no longer startled William. He'd come to expect Ethan's uncanny ability to target emotional pressure points. Partly, he admitted. My father wanted a certain kind of son, someone cold, calculated, ruthless in business. Eventually, I became exactly that. Mom never said you were cold, Ethan said quietly, watching his bobber. Even when she was angriest, she said you weren't always that way, that something must have happened. William stared across the lake, evening light gilding the water. Your mother saw things in me I'd forgotten existed. They fell silent as Ethan's line suddenly went taut. William guided him through, reeling in a respectable base, Ethan's face lighting with triumph despite his trembling arms. Later, after a simple dinner, Ethan sat wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, fighting sleep. Will you tell me about when you met Mom? The request surprised William, but he found himself speaking of a younger, idealistic Melissa who'd challenged his emerging corporate mentality, who'd believed medicine should heal more than bank accounts. She never stopped believing that, Ethan murmured sleepily, even when she got sick and the insurance wouldn't cover her treatments. William's breath caught. What? But Ethan had drifted off, leaving William with questions that gnawed at him throughout the night. At dawn, William found Ethan already awake, watching sunrise paint the lake in amber and gold. They sat in comfortable silence until Ethan suddenly clutched his arm, face contorted in pain. Muscle spasm, he gasped. It'll pass. William froze, unprepared for this manifestation of the disease that lurked beneath their weekend idyll. When Ethan's emergency medication wasn't immediately effective, true fear gripped William for the first time since becoming a father. As he held his son through the painful episode, William faced a truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't just fighting for better treatments or adaptations. He was racing against time itself. The Taylor Pharmaceuticals boardroom fell silent as William concluded his presentation. 20 executive faces stared back at him with expressions ranging from shock to outright hostility. Let me understand this correctly. Gerald Hoffman, the CFO, finally spoke. You want to allocate 40% of our R&D budget to rare diseases? The same diseases we've consistently deemed financially non-viable? William stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid but confident. Not just rare diseases, Gerald. A specific division focused on pediatric neuromuscular conditions. With all due respect, William, Patricia Chen, head of investor relations, interjected. This proposal would cut projected profits by nearly 30% in the next fiscal year. Our shareholders invested in a company that innovates. William interrupted. That's precisely what I'm proposing. Innovation that generates return, Gerald countered. This is philanthropy masquerading as business strategy. William's eyes narrowed. Is it philanthropy to recognize untapped markets? To position ourselves ahead of competitors in emerging treatment fields? To build goodwill that translates to brand loyalty? The corporate doublespeak felt hollow even as he said it. But William knew their language. He'd invented much of it himself over the years. Your sudden interest in these conditions wouldn't have anything to do with the boy, would it? Gerald asked quietly. The room tensed. Everyone had heard rumors about William's newly discovered son with a progressive medical condition. My personal life is irrelevant to this discussion, William replied coldly, though his pulse quickened. The proposal stands on its business merits. The board will need to vote, Patricia reminded him. And frankly, William, you may not like the outcome. Back at the mansion that evening, William found Ethan in his newly renovated room, surrounded by advanced assistive technology, voice-activated systems, specialized computer interfaces, and mobility aids all discreetly integrated into the space. How was your meeting? Ethan asked, looking up from a physics textbook. William hesitated. Challenging. They don't want to help kids like me, do they? The perceptiveness still caught William off guard. It's complicated. No, it isn't, Ethan replied simply. They think we're not worth the money. William sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, suddenly exhausted. I used to think that way too. What changed? Ethan asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. Before William could answer, his phone rang, Rebecca calling from downstairs. "Sir, Dr. Matthews is here for Ethan's evaluation." The specialist's visit was lengthy and thorough. William observed from the corner as Dr. Matthews put Ethan through a series of assessments, measuring strength, coordination, and respiratory function. The doctor's expression remained professionally neutral, but William had spent decades reading subtle cues in business negotiations. "How bad?" William asked bluntly once Ethan was resting. Dr. Matthews removed his glasses. "The progression is concerning, faster than we'd hope, his respiratory function particularly. Treatment options? Standard protocols for now, but there's an experimental treatment showing promise." "Unfortunately, cost is no object," William interrupted. "It's not about cost, Mr. Taylor, it's about access. The treatment is still in trials with very limited spots." William's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his office. The board had called an emergency session for the following morning. That night, William stood in the doorway of Ethan's room watching his son sleep. The boy's breathing seemed more labored than before, or perhaps William was simply more attuned to it now. His phone buzzed again with a message from Gerald. "Reconsider your position before tomorrow. The votes are counting against you." William turned off his phone, his decision already made. The hospital corridor seemed endless as William paced outside Ethan's treatment room. 3 days had passed since the emergency board meeting where he'd made his stand. "Mr. Taylor?" A nurse appeared. "He's asking for you." William entered to find Ethan connected to monitoring equipment, his thin frame diminished further against the white hospital sheets. The latest episode had been the worst yet. Respiratory distress that turned his lips blue before the emergency team stabilized him. "You're supposed to be in your board meeting," Ethan said weakly. William shook his head, taking the chair beside the bed. "Some things are more important. Did they fire you?" The directness of the question brought an unexpected smile to William's face. "Not exactly." He adjusted Ethan's blanket. "I still own controlling interest in the company. They can't fire me, but they voted to suspend several of my initiatives." What William didn't share was the ruthlessness of the confrontation, how the board had presented him with an ultimatum: abandon the rare disease initiative or face a coordinated shareholder revolt. How he'd looked Gerald Hoffman in the eye and replied simply, "Do your worst." Dr. Matthews entered, carrying a tablet with test results. "Mr. Taylor, we should discuss Ethan's options." As the doctor detailed the experimental treatment protocol, AI, gene therapy showing promising results in similar cases, William noticed Ethan's intense focus. "How many children are in this trial?" Ethan asked suddenly. Dr. Matthews hesitated. "Currently 12 worldwide. It's extremely limited." "But there are thousands with my condition," Ethan persisted. "Unfortunately, yes." William recognized the expression settling over his son's face, the same calculating assessment he himself made before difficult business decisions. "I don't want it," Ethan announced. "Ethan," William began. "It's not fair," Ethan continued, firmly. "You could probably get me in because you're rich and influential, but what about everyone else?" The ensuing silence held a weight William had never experienced in any boardroom confrontation. "We'll discuss this later," William finally said. "You need to rest." That night, William sat alone in the hospital waiting room. Tie loosened, suit rumpled. Rebecca brought him coffee, her expression sympathetic. "He's sleeping now," she reported. "His oxygen levels are better." William nodded absently, his mind racing through scenarios, contingencies, possibilities. He refused the trial spot. William said finally, "A 9-year-old with more ethical clarity than most of my board." Rebecca sat beside him. "He's his father's son in determination, and perhaps his mother's in heart." The comment struck William deeply. Melissa would have been proud of him today. I'm not sure she would say the same about me. "I think she might surprise you," Rebecca replied gently. William stared at his reflection in the window. The successful businessman who'd prioritized profit margins over human lives for decades. The man who'd abandoned research that might have helped his own son years earlier. A text message interrupted his thoughts. His lead research scientist. Breakthrough in the myofibrillar protocol. Need funding approval immediately to proceed. William's fingers hovered over the phone. His personal fortune remained vast even if company resources were now restricted. He could fund the research privately, perhaps secure a treatment for Ethan, but Ethan's words echoed. What about everyone else? By morning, William had his answer. He entered Ethan's room with renewed purpose. I have a proposition, he told his son. You accept the trial spot, and I use every resource I have to expand the trial to include 50 more children. Ethan studied him suspiciously. Can you do that? Watch me, William replied with the confidence that had built his empire. The cemetery looked different in the morning light. 1 year ago, William had visited out of cold obligation. Today he stood by Melissa's grave with Ethan beside him, both carrying wildflowers gathered from the lake cabin's meadow. She loved these, Ethan said, carefully arranging his bouquet against the headstone. His movements were more measured now, the experimental treatments bringing subtle stability to his condition, but not the miraculous recovery William had secretly hoped for. William watched his son with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness. 6 months into the expanded trial program, Ethan had become something of a leader among the participants, his resilience inspiring children and parents alike. The medical community had taken note of the unusual trial expansion, funded primarily through William's personal fortune after his corporate board had limited company involvement. I brought something, William said, removing an envelope from his jacket. Unlike Melissa's yellowed letter that had changed his life a year ago, this one was crisp and new, sealed with deliberate care. What is it? Ethan asked. A letter to your mother? William placed it beside the flowers. The gesture felt simultaneously foolish and necessary. Ethan nodded with unexpected understanding. I talk to her sometimes too, even though she can't hear me. Perhaps she can, William replied, surprising himself with the sentiment. They sat together on a bench facing the grave, the spring sunshine warming their shoulders. William had never imagined finding peace in a cemetery, yet here it was, a quiet moment shared with his son, contemplating the woman who had connected their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. Do you remember when she got sick? William asked carefully, a question that had lingered since their cabin conversation. Ethan nodded. It happened fast. She was tired all the time. Then the doctors found something in her lungs. His clinical description reminded William so much of himself that it was startling. She couldn't afford the specialist, so her regular doctor did what he could. William's chest tightened. She never asked me for help. She said you had your own life now, that you wouldn't want to be bothered. Ethan's voice held no accusation, just a child's recounting of facts as presented to him. She was wrong, William said quietly. I would have helped. Would you? Ethan looked at him directly. The person you were then, would he have helped? The question hung between them, honest and unflinching. I don't know, William finally admitted. And that's something I'll have to live with. They remained in contemplative silence until Ethan spoke again. The night before she died, Mom made me promise to find you. Not just because I needed somewhere to go, but because she still believed in you. Ethan's fingers traced patterns on his wheelchair armrest. She said you were meant for more than making money, that you could change the world if you remembered why you started making medicine in the first place. William's throat constricted with unexpected emotion. In her final moments, Melissa had seen something in him that he'd long forgotten existed. The idealistic young researcher who'd once dreamed of curing diseases, not just profiting from them. I'm trying to remember, William said softly. As they prepared to leave, Ethan looked back at the grave. Do you think she'd be proud of us? Of how we are now? William considered the changes of the past year, not just in his business priorities or his home adaptations, but in himself. The walls he'd built over decades hadn't fully disappeared, but they had cracked enough to let something vital through. Yes, he answered with certainty. I think she would. The headline splashed across.
Financial news websites worldwide. Pharmaceutical titan William Taylor divests majority stake in Taylor Pharmaceuticals.
In the Taylor Mansion's newly renovated study, now accessible with wider doorways and a desk that accommodated Ethan's wheelchair, William closed his laptop as his son wheeled in. "You really did it," Ethan said, holding a tablet displaying the same headline. "You sold your company." "Not exactly," William corrected. "I've retained a minority interest and advisory position. But yes, I've liquidated most of my shares." The corporate battle had been brutal. After William's continued insistence on prioritizing rare disease research, the board had staged what amounted to a coup, threatening to oust him completely. Rather than fight, William had made a strategic retreat, selling his controlling interest for a figure that made financial analysts gasp. "Ms. Chen from your board was on TV," Ethan continued. "She called your decision inexplicable and contrary to shareholder interests." A small smile touched William's lips. Patricia always did have a way with words. "Are you sad about it? Losing your company?" William considered the question with genuine reflection. The empire he'd spent 20 years building had defined him completely until a year ago. Now it felt like shedding a skin that had grown too tight. "No," he answered truthfully. "I'm ready for what comes next." What came next was already taking shape in the building downtown that William had purchased outright. The Taylor Foundation for Rare Disease Research was no longer just a concept on paper, but a physical reality, with laboratories being equipped and scientists being recruited. "Dr. Jenkins called," William told Ethan. "He's accepted the research director position." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "The guy who called you a shark?" "The very same." William's expression turned serious. "He's brilliant, ethical, and doesn't fear telling me when I'm wrong. Exactly what the foundation needs." As spring turned to summer, the foundation took shape, with remarkable speed. William's business acumen, freed from profit constraints, proved equally effective at advancing medical research. The expanded trial that had started with Ethan now included over 100 children worldwide. One morning, a feature article appeared in a major science publication, highlighting the foundation's unconventional approach. The journalist had coined a new nickname for William, the pharmaceutical reformer. "Better than shark," Rebecca commented, showing William the article over breakfast. William shook his head. "I'm not interested in reputation rehabilitation." "No," Rebecca agreed. "But it matters to those watching, especially him." She nodded toward Ethan, who was engrossed in a video call with another trial participant from across the country. That afternoon, as William prepared for a foundation meeting, he found Ethan waiting in the foyer. "Can I come with you today?" he asked. "I want to see it." At the foundation headquarters, William watched with quiet pride as Ethan explored the laboratories, asking astute questions that impressed even veteran researchers. The boy who had entered his life a year ago, frightened and alone, now moved through the scientific space with purpose and growing confidence. "Is this what you wanted when you started Taylor Pharmaceuticals?" Ethan asked later, as they overlooked the research floor from William's new office. "It's what I should have wanted," William admitted. "Somewhere along the way I forgot the purpose behind the profit." As they prepared to leave, a researcher approached with preliminary results from a new protocol. William began to review the data, then paused, handing the tablet to Ethan. "What do you think?" he asked. "You understand this condition better than anyone." 1 year had passed since the foundation's launch. What had begun as William's personal mission had evolved into a respected research institution, attracting top scientific minds worldwide. The expanded treatment trial now included over 200 children across 5 continents, with promising stability results in many cases, including Ethan's. Today marked Ethan's 10th birthday. The mansion, once cold and sterile, had transformed into a home filled with evidence of a child's presence, scientific posters adorning walls, adaptive technology seamlessly integrated, and a grand piano in the main room where Ethan practiced daily despite his condition. Everything, Ready for this afternoon? William asked Rebecca as they prepared breakfast. Dr. Jenkins confirmed the lab tour is arranged, she replied. And all the kids from Ethan's support group are coming to the party after. William nodded, still marveling at how completely his life had changed. The man who once refused dinner, invitations from world leaders now eagerly anticipated a children's birthday party. When Ethan entered the kitchen, William presented him with a small wrapped box. Happy birthday, son. Inside was a badge with Ethan's name and the foundation logo. Official junior researcher, Ethan read aloud, his face lighting up. Not just for show, William explained. Dr. Jenkins says your observations about the treatment effects have been invaluable. He wants you to start documenting them formally. Later that morning, they arrived at the foundation headquarters. Where once William had moved through corporate spaces demanding deference, he now walked beside Ethan, matching his pace to his son's. The laboratory had been prepared for visitors with ongoing experiments safely secured but visible. Dr. Jenkins greeted them warmly, the former adversary now a trusted ally in their shared mission. The birthday boy arrives, he announced, leading them through security doors to the main research floor. As planned, the entire research team awaited, along with several children from the treatment program who lived nearby. What William hadn't expected was the presentation screen displaying Project Ethan, the formal name of the Foundation's flagship research initiative. We've made a breakthrough, Dr. Jenkins announced. The modified protein therapy is showing remarkable results in preventing further degradation of muscle tissue. As Dr. Jenkins explained the technical details, William watched Ethan absorbing every word, asking questions that reflected a sophisticated understanding of his own condition. Pride swelled in his chest, not the cold satisfaction of corporate conquest, but something warmer and more profound. During the tour, William noticed Ethan gravitating repeatedly toward one researcher, Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant neurologist, who had joined the Foundation 6 months earlier after leaving a prestigious position at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Chen has been helping me understand how the treatment works, Ethan explained when William inquired later. She explains things without talking down to me. At the birthday party afterward, William observed Dr. Chen's natural rapport with not just Ethan but all the children. She moved between wheelchairs and mobility aids with ease, her genuine interest in their experiences evident. Your son is remarkable, she told William quietly as the children enjoyed cake. His insights have actually influenced our research direction. He gets his intelligence from his mother, William replied. Dr. Chen studied him thoughtfully. And his determination to change the world from his father, I think. That evening, as Ethan showed his new science books to the last lingering guests, William stood back, taking in the scene. His son, surrounded by friends, animated despite his physical limitations, finding joy in discovery and connection. For the first time, William allowed himself to feel something he'd carefully guarded against. Hope. Not just for Ethan's medical prognosis, but for the life they were building together, one that had meaning beyond balance sheets and market shares. 2 years had passed since that fateful day at the cemetery, when a boy in a wheelchair had handed William a letter that changed everything. The Foundation headquarters buzzed with anticipation as researchers, patients, and families gathered for a momentous announcement. In the main laboratory, modified to accommodate the many wheelchairs present, Dr. Jenkins stood next to Dr. Chen, both beaming with barely contained excitement. William waited in the back with Ethan, watching as people filled every available space. Nervous? William asked, noticing Ethan's hands fidgeting on his wheelchair armrests. A little, Ethan admitted. At 11, he'd grown taller, his features maturing to show even more resemblance to William, though his smile remained entirely Melissa's. Dr. Jenkins stepped forward to address the crowd. 2 years ago, when William Taylor approached me about heading this foundation, I thought it was a publicity stunt. Appreciative laughter rippled through the room. I couldn't have been more wrong. Today, we announced that the modified protein therapy combined with Dr. Chen's revolutionary gene treatment approach has shown unprecedented success in clinical trials. A murmur swept through the audience as Dr. Chen took over. explaining in accessible terms how the treatment not only halted progression of the disease but, in some cases, allowed for regeneration of damaged tissue. And now, she concluded, I'd like to invite Ethan Taylor to demonstrate. All eyes turned to the back of the room where Ethan sat in his wheelchair. William knelt beside him, voice low. Remember, whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Ethan nodded, determination setting his jaw. With William standing close but not helping, Ethan pushed himself to his feet. A collective breath was held as he stood, trembling slightly but upright. Then, with deliberate concentration, he took one step forward, then another. The room erupted in applause as Ethan walked slowly but steadily across the laboratory floor. When he reached Dr. Chen, tears streamed freely down her face as she embraced him. William remained in the back, his own vision blurred with emotion. Later that evening, in the mansion's garden that now boasted wide paths and accessible seating, areas William, Ethan, and Dr. Chen, Sarah as they now called her, planted a young oak tree. Mom would have loved this, Ethan said, patting soil around the sapling's base. His movements were still careful, the treatment not a miracle cure, but a remarkable beginning. She would, William agreed, thinking of the letter he'd left at Melissa's. Grave a year before, his confession, his gratitude, his promise to be the father she'd believed he could be. Sarah stepped back to admire their work. Over the past year, she had become a fixture in their lives, her brilliance matched by her compassion, her presence bringing warmth to spaces that had once been cold. It will take years to grow, Ethan observed, looking up at the slender tree. Dear, best things do, William replied, placing a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture that once felt foreign but now came naturally. As the evening light faded, William watched Ethan walk slowly but confidently toward the house, Sarah beside him, discussing his latest science project. The boy who had entered his life broken and afraid now moved forward with purpose and hope. William remained by the sapling a moment longer, reflecting on the extraordinary journey from ruthless pharmaceutical titan to father, from profit seeker to healer. The true miracle wasn't just in the medical breakthrough or in Ethan's steps, it was in his own transformation, in learning that real wealth couldn't be measured in market shares or stock prices. You were right, Melissa, he whispered, to the twilight air. He saved me first.